Niki, for joining us. Oh, got a pop up for recording. Really happy that Niki is speaking at our seminar series, a research seminar series today. Many of you might actually know Niki one way or another. I think you spent some time at MSDI some years ago. When was that, Niki? I can't really recall.
I spent almost a year from November 2011 to July 2012.
Right.
Not in MSSI. I was back in the Department of Geography in the newly established group on water sensitive cities.
Right. Okay. Oh, someone I thought you were at MSDI. Anyway, you were at Monash, so that's good. And still, many people might know you also for the other places because, well, Niki at the moment, she's a research professor at Swinburne University since 2019, and she's the director of the Center for Urban Transitions. And she's having a long background in things that we are interested in as well, so systems change and transition management, in particular in urban areas. And I guess the last couple of years, you've also become really a prominent person in the whole debate around nature-based solutions, so particular urban nature and how that might play a role in transformations towards sustainable cities. You've been extremely active, I should say. I think you finished your PhD in 2010?
11.
11. And since then, I think you went on a publication and project funding racetrack with over 100 publications, 4 books, 15 special issues, and you've been very successful in winning many grants in Europe, in US, Canada, and so on. And more recently, also in Australia. So you won a linkage grant on walkable cities. You won a discovery grant on the role of small and medium enterprises in transformations. And you're also a partner in our Sustainable Communities and Waste Hub, the NESP2 program that we are collaborating in. So there's simply too much to mention, I think, Niki. You've been very productive and covering lots of different topics. The only thing I can say to everyone who wants to know more, just follow Niki on Twitter. I think every free minute you have, you spend on Twitter and post updates on anything you do. So maybe Niki should let us know what your Twitter address is later on. But for now, I just want to hand over to you for your talk and on nature-based solutions for urban transitions. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to present. I'm going to share my screen. I have prepared the presentation, but my only question is how long I have for talking, because I really would like to have questions also. So, Rob, tell me.
Yeah, so we're a bit flexible, but it would be good to have some maybe 20 minutes or 15 minutes at least at the end for questions. So I'm happy to give you a 5-minute warning or signal. So around probably around 12:35.
Okay.
And then, yeah, okay.
Perfect, thank
Thanks.
you. And this one. Okay, I don't know, did it share it? And I need presentation view. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep. Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Rob, for the introduction. I think it sets the scene on what I'm going to talk today, and I want to give you my insights and also inputs from very recent research I'm doing and we are doing at the Center for Urban Transitions. And also through my collaborations with the Global Natura project, as well as a number of European projects I'm still involved in on the recent research on nature-based solutions for urban transformations. And just give me a second, okay. Before starting, I want to have a proper acknowledgement of the country. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we now meet. Even though we meet online, we're still sitting on the land. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So we are, I think, is an understatement to say, we're in a midst of pandemic and post-pandemic state of mind. We have seen our infrasystems, including our urban common spaces, to be in extreme pressures and also questioning their functions, re-envisioning and reimagining how we want to live from now on, as well as a lot of unquestioned practices of the past or the status quo are now under scrutiny, not only how we live our lives, but also where we look up to, what are the models, imaginaries, and visions that we have, what type of societies we want to have in the future. Coming from transition studies and being a sustainability transition scholar, I always look on the crisis and shocks as windows of opportunities, exactly for leapfrogging transitions to more sustainable and resilient futures. There are a number of frameworks and a number, of course, of theories that they have been developed across different scholarships, including resilience thinking, including transitions thinking, about how we can understand different types of transformations, especially in the aftermath of a window of opportunity. In the work we have published together with colleagues from Stockholm Resilience Center, we provide a little bit of a thinking framework, how we can look on maladaptation, how we can look on updraft, as well as directed transformation. This, of course, comes to give us a lot of food for thought of the type of cities and the type of urban environment and urban livings we want. 3 weeks ago, United Nations Environment Program, they published their report, Making Peace with Nature. They talk a lot about how we can look in the future by looking on the different kind of transformations that we need to set foot and accelerate in order to actually create a nature positive future, nature-based positive economy. One of the key figures and statements is the one presented in the slide, is about improving our relationship with nature, understanding its value and putting that value at the heart of our decision making. In their chapter about cities, it actually aligns with a lot of recent research, especially coming from Europe, US, and Canada. So if we are to look on how to leapfrog our transitions to urban resilience and sustainability, I can say that I can propose 3 different ways that we have to stream our research efforts and our research policy and community collaborations. The first is to look what can make transformative innovations flourish, embedded, scale up, and mainstream. The second pillar would be on looking innovative policy across scales. I know from talking from the Australian grounds, we need to look on the multi-level governance perspective, including also metropolitan scale. But overall, we need to look on the global innovative policy, the state innovative policy, as well as the local innovative planning and governance approaches. But all this cannot happen if we don't see about new ways of building governance capacities for this transformation. A lot of recent work, especially on the governance of sustainability transitions, especially looking on cities, they talk about the importance of shifting to a capacities understanding and a capacities conceptualization for transformation. So if we all look the post-pandemic as well as the climate change as a transformation challenge, we need to look on how we can make not only the governance systems, but also the research that feeds in and create an evidence base into more systemic, experimental, and flexible. Let's talk nature-based solutions. They fit in the mix of looking on what would be these transformative innovations in cities that can connect the social, the ecological, the economic, as well as knowledge systems together. Looking on the definition developed and coined in the first working paper or blueprint, you might say, from the European Commission back in 2016, nature-based solutions are inspired by nature, use nature, and or are supported by nature so as to address multiple interdependent environmental challenges, as well as economic, societal, and broader global economic challenges at the moment. Over the time, because we are now, you might say, into the mainstreaming or into the scaling up of the nature-based solutions approach, there are different definitions emerging as well. A complementary, I'm not saying it as conflicting, but rather as a complementary definition comes from the IUCN. IUCN adds to the definition of the European Commission two main elements. The one is that nature-based solutions need to be landscape approaches or inform landscape approaches, so as to remind us about the interconnectedness and process understanding, the teleconnections of urban landscapes or landscapes in general. And the second aspect is about giving back and contributing to biodiversity. Something that creates quite of an additional, you might say, element when we look on providing multiple benefits through building nature-based solutions. A lot of effort has been put on the definition, and a lot of criticism has been received for the definition and how we understand nature-based solutions. Some people claimed in papers that it is old wine in new bottles, that it is about greenwashing, geoengineering, that it is about just creating another empty cast, with even an editorial in 2017 in Nature claiming that we need to be aware of the empty promise of nature-based solutions. Coming a bit from my perspective on this, and I'm coming from the team who actually orchestrated and advocated of having a definition on nature-based solutions that is a bridging one, I can say that by design, the definition of nature-based solutions and their conceptualization, it is about bridging different bodies of literature, from urban ecology, from environmental engineering, integrated water management, water sensitive, urban design, ecosystem-based adaptation, green infrastructure, and I continue to go on all these different scholarships and research in place that they have been saying and arguing the same thing. What we found on a global landscape, and when interacting between the European Commission, Belmont Forum, United States, the NSF, Canada, as well as the Japan and Chinese Academies of Sciences back in 2016, is that instead of having all these different definitions fighting for policy attention and funding attention, what if we have one bridging definition that creates this massive opportunity to bridge the different evidence base and create a case for bringing nature back in the policy table? I have to say, by looking on the different developments globally, this has been quite a successful case. Nature-based solutions now feature as climate adaptation solutions, as nature innovation solutions across very prominent global bodies. Bringing back to the knowledge we have, we conceptualize and understand, as well as provide basis for different type of evaluation frameworks. In the work we did with Eclipse Group, we provided the basis of one of the guiding frameworks for evaluation, monitoring, and designing nature-based solutions that look on all these different co-production and interactive feedback loops between socioeconomic, sociocultural, ecological, and infrastructure systems in cities. So we look and we gathered evidence across the literature to come with a framework that showed also that NBS have the potential to respond to multiple urban challenges. Since that work, European Commission alone committed a budget of 187 million euros without counting what is gonna be on the new Green Deal calls, specifically targeting to create evidence, but also create productive collaborations between policy and science, and between citizen science and communities into scaling up nature-based solutions. Sorry, I click on the wrong button. This brings us to Australia and to the rest of the globe. We do face the extinction crisis, and in 2019, a number of cities, they declared climate emergency. when we look on the different needs for pushing this agenda further and how we can capitalize on the evidence and knowledge we have on nature-based solutions, together with Australian colleagues, we came with 5 main insights and 5 main directions, especially if we are to leapfrog into urban sustainability, putting nature first and putting nature on the agenda. It's no surprise, but it's always important to note that systems approaches are needed in urban planning, even though they come in science and they come with a lot of validation of the importance of understanding systems processes and system dynamics. This is not an ad hoc process. Novel ecosystems, as a part of nature-based solutions, need to be considered as climate innovations in cities. There are a pocketful of cities that they are actually pioneering this approach. They build evidence and they also become iconic around the globe. The view is how middle-sized and small cities, as well as metropolitan areas, can now mainstream and can support that type of pathway for the transition to urban sustainability. Resilience principles showcased in a large network around the globe of cities, not only with 100 resilient cities, but also with cities with nature platform and a number of other city networks, need now and they are ready to become more mainstream in the design and the management of nature-based solutions. Experimentation and transdisciplinarity can use to strengthen but also extend expertise. I think we are, and we see the evidence across the cities in the globe, that it's not about adopting an experimentation and a transdisciplinary approach, but using it and employing it about how they collect evidence, how they extend in-house expertise in their strategic planning, their tactical planning departments. And then, not only relevant for Australia, but also for other nations, is to look closely on how to co-produce knowledge with indigenous people, with First Nations, for bringing nature in the city. So having a global perspectives and looking on pathways forward, it is important to know where we are right now. There are in total 169 review papers published by end of January this year on nature-based solutions alone. We screened and identified 43 of them. They talk about cities. 2 very prominent ones, the one of Almenar and the one of Hadji Mentor, they identify where actually the epicenter of research on nature-based solutions in terms of evidence, in terms of novel conceptualizations, novel designs, sits. And as you see in the map, we have a rather northern hemisphere domination of where the knowledge originates and where the evidence-based is actually becoming richer and richer. What does this mean and what does this imply is that we need to look closely on not only what is categorized, but also how we can learn from different contexts for better ecologically and climate sensitive design of NBS. We identify different challenges by looking on the current state of the art at the global level. This is unpublished work. We are waiting to listen from the reviewers. So I'm sharing some bites of this research with you in the seminar. So first is about the conceptual challenge. NBS, it is an umbrella bridging concept. This is recognized across the literature, brings together, of course, diverse but related interventions. However, there is also a challenge that we might see also a divide between the academic community and the community of practice, the practitioners, in terms of how they understand, but also how they put and how they gather knowledge about nature-based solutions. So is it about to divide them and consider these different tacit and expert knowledge separate, or unite them towards a global knowledge alliance? We talk about a knowledge geography challenge, as the maps illustrate, and also as our review indicates. The epicenters are in Europe and United States. Asia and other areas in the globe are emerging in the literature, but there is a strong geographical and geophysical bias on this. So how can we actually create new knowledge, new contexts that does not adopt an adoption pathway, but rather than an emerging pathway? The research challenge is majorly about their geophysical, but also the nature and the benefit contributions that are being seen. Very simple, I can tell you that we see a lot of evidence for the water or the wet NBS, as we call them. So the majority of them address water-related challenges. But what comes to other weather-related or climate change-related pressures, such as droughts? We see more and more of this question emerging, and this is also an opportunity for future research. So the fourth aspect is about the societal challenge we see. So in both the IUCN standard published in November last year, as well as in all the frameworks and the majority of the case studies on governing NBS for urban sustainability and resilience, there is a very strong conclusion and evidence that the multiple benefits across socio, ecological, and economic aspects, the multiple benefits emerge when they are planned, managed, and maintained in an inclusive way. However, this has to relate with where the evidence comes from and what is the global practice with them. So before drafting conclusions of how far we can go and what is the best practice of inclusive governance, we need to look very closely of where we draw the evidence from. And then the governance challenge, or the planning challenge, you might say, has interconnected is what we find as a main barrier is that the NBS implementation is blocked due to siloed thinking and fragmented approaches in planning. Definitely not new. Any person who has worked on sustainability in cities, sustainable solutions, integrated water management, sustainable water management approaches, even adopting the MAES framework or ecosystem services frameworks in cities, finds the same block all the time. But there have been also cases in cities that showcase how you can actually burst these silos, how you can work and navigate this very salient challenge through innovative ways. The question is for whom and for what to plan with NBS. So it all relates into the inclusive governance and to how you seize expertise and knowledge creation and how to do this in an inclusive and sustainable ways, and for the city and for the city government and administration. One by one, we offer a number of pathways, majorly to elucidate and actually to engage with new communities of research, but also to put especially early career researchers into more innovative research pathways than replicating or reinvigorating salient research challenges. So what we offer here is a number of these pathways. I'm not gonna read them out. I'm just gonna give you some insights of research that we have been completing and realizing in the center. So if we look on the conceptual challenge, it is about looking to work across disciplines and schools of thoughts, and especially looking on how to connect with different research epistemological paradigms. And this is something that I know it's very challenging and very difficult. However, it can also give us new insights and evidence of concepts like how do you deal with gentrification dynamics when a greening project or a project that has nature-based solutions as part of the development comes in place. Is an egg and a chicken situation. So far, even the academic scholarship is rather divided. can we employ new methods? Can we employ new investigatory designs of our research architectures to go about it? The net is about the science to policy dialogue. And I know that in MSSI, as well as at CAT, as well as in a number of other research epicenters around the globe, our whole mission is how to bridge science to policy and community. So we need also to think and systematize our findings to make them actionable, to make them translatable and transferable for designing and scaling the NBS knowledge. So far, we do a lot of methods, and we employ a lot of methods that are mainly coming from consultation approach. Can we devise and systematize different methods for that? In terms of the societal challenge, it is a lot about how to make inclusive planning work. What are different aspects, what are different approaches. From my work back in the Netherlands, I work with 11 different cities around Europe in the Resilient Europe project, employing the urban living labs as a concept of intervention in different deprived neighborhoods, and using and tailoring transition management as a methodology, as a process methodology for co-creating different action plans and interventions in the place of cities. What we saw is that there are different lessons learned and taken into consideration on how to do, what are the conditions and what are also the barriers for inclusive planning of nature-based solutions in cities. The project lasted 5 years. Sorry, my computer takes this here. Lasted 5 years, and we saw a number of these cities actually taking action, transforming the places, moving from a vision and action plan to actually changing the urban landscape. When it worked, when diverse ways of intervention they were employed, when the co-creation process was really open also to conflict and contestation, and it also relied on the capability of the urban planning teams to actually bridge between knowledges, bring different experts from their cities as well as international experts together on the table. In the picture, you see the green pathway co-creation process with pictures and with imaginaries with communities in St. Andries in Antwerp, looking at one of the deprived neighborhoods and how to change it into a walkable, inviting green pathway of the city. So if we are to build just cities with nature-based solutions, we need to take two sets of lenses together, the climate justice and the ecological justice into perspective. And we need to look and take our data on board, but to give us the long-term view, the pattern identification for injustice hotspots, as well as for areas of opportunities to intervene. And we need to always keep in mind the planning step and processes. An example from very recently published work from the center and from Elisa Pinto is how can we employ and a socio-ecological justice perspective into identifying hotspots of injustice hotspots in Melbourne, so as to see whether they are policy and planning blind spots for these areas. The big picture on this, and these are the different type of maps of 3 justice considerations: distributional justice, recognition justice, and participation justice. So the big picture is that when you have areas with a high number of environmental harmful activities and low levels of recognition of those activities, as well low social and governance capital from communities, we identify that these areas are more vulnerable. In recognizing and analyzing this, we found that there is a history behind this. The suburbs, that they have industrial land uses, that they were not properly managed and bioremediated, and they have left a trace of contamination, are the ones that they pop up as red spots, as hot spots in our assessment. But at the same time, there is a path dependency there. The communities, the social structures, the social capital, the social capacity, as well as the governance capacity is lacking. And this is more of a diagnostic lens. But what it actually means, if we take these type of approaches, that they bridge the more conceptual lenses of just cities and how justice in cities can be recognized, with bridging it to inform and look on policy development, policy gaps, as well as policy failures, it is important for future applications to actually not only do it as a policy exercise, but also use it to identify types of interventions, including nature-based solutions, as well as governance approaches to the different hotspots, without neglecting the typology of traps of Brooks back in 2009. It is important to extend this and establish a typology of this type of hotspots. Most of the cities post-pandemic, they look on how to plan better, how to create pandemic recovery plans that they also take into consideration socio-ecological and health injustices. I think we have to start thinking and proposing ways to inform policy towards this direction. And then coming again from a sustainability thinking perspective is not only about talking about problems and talking about challenges, but also identify areas of opportunities through a justice lens. I don't know how much time I have. Okay, one more minute, right, Rob?
Yeah, you've got a couple of more minutes if you want to.
Looking on the governance of NBS, a challenge is how to implement and adopt such systemic solutions due to persistent organizational and administration issues of silo thinking, as well as fragmented approaches in planning. As I said before, for my research in 11 different cities, and also I have to say in the research I'm undertaking here with Australian cities, looking on their capacities for planning, for implementing and for scaling up nature-based solutions. I have already completed 15 different interviews. I find a similar pattern. There is the diversity of nature-based solution types and approaches that they can actually drive urban climate innovations. We also require more diversity of institutional spaces for co-creating, co-managing nature-based solutions in cities. And then you need to allow for people, even though we employ an umbrella concept, to still understand it in a diverse way. We need to look on more an inclusive narrative of mission for NBS, so as not only to bridge diverse knowledge from communities, from indigenous people, from experts, from consultants, from NGOs, from civil society, but also an inclusive narrative of mission to bridge different agendas across departments and sectors. So it is about looking on the diversity as a guiding principle for bridging and moving forward to the governance challenge. In this, I also want to say that when we talk about diverse NBS, it means that we need to look at them as a portfolio. So we need to look on what are the different types of them that they can help different urban contexts without losing the landscape perspective. In our recent paper published with Australian practitioners and researchers on urban agriculture, we say and we posit that we need to consider urban agriculture in Australia cities as a nature-based solution, given that it provides a lot of socio-ecological benefits. If we are to move towards that, we need to strive for a depth of data collection, for a systematic evidence-based approach, as well as employ an actionable transdisciplinary research approach so as to bridge, but also integrate communities of practice with urban planning. And this, putting it back in the bigger perspective and in the bigger picture, is about diffusing but also connecting knowledge from the local to the global. And this way, always validating not only the idea, but also the data, as well as enriching the evidence base to inform better science and scientific discovery, as well as better policy and planning. And I think I will stop here, even though I have at least 20 more slides. And I will go a little bit fast forward into saying it is important to create new science and new knowledge, but also by doing this, we need to think about connecting different disciplines, connecting different evidence grounds, and keep in mind that science, and I will say science of cities, has a major role to play in transformative change. And this is, of course, from the Global Assessment Co-Chair of Nbs, looking on nature contributions to people and nature contributions to a positive global environmental change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niki.
I have more slides, but I stop here.
Oh, perfect. It's 20 to 12, so we've got 20 minutes for questions and discussion. That's great. Thank you for providing an overview of all the different types of work you've been doing and creating a narrative around that and talking it together. That's great. I'm just going to open up the floor for questions, but to give people a little bit of time to ask one, I'm going to start with one myself. And this is about, I guess, the economic side of nature-based solutions. You address many different types of aspects, and your emphasis is on the multiple benefits that nature-based solutions can provide, including socio-ecological benefits, for instance. But one of the major challenges is that how do you value those benefits? Who is going to pay for those benefits if someone has to pay for them? What are the sort of business models or collaborative business models that you envision that might work around nature-based solutions? I just wanted to throw out there because it seems to me that was an issue that I thought you didn't talk about a lot, and maybe you do have ideas around that as well.
Yeah, thanks. Well, there are like two aspects to this. The first one is a lot of NBS exemplars around the globe, they are not monitored and evaluated using economic indicators. And this is because cost-benefit analysis, when it was applied, it actually undermines a lot of non-monetary values and benefits of exactly nature in cities. A number of cities, they try to turn nature-based solutions into a business case for making it a case, especially for maintaining in the agenda. And I know cases from three major cities. One is the city of New York, the 1 million trees urban forestry strategy. It also came together with an evaluation of how much money in terms of insurance and climate adaptation damages that strategy is going to save the metropolitan city of New York. And I have this picture, but I didn't include it. I have included so many presentations included here that they actually put a price tag in all the trees of the city and say, this tree is costing this money and is generating this money by saving the infrastructure from all the climate damage. Another aspect is there is a lot of work on the insurance value of urban ecosystems being done over the past years. What we face is this research needs to be translated into a business model framework. So the research and the evidence is there, but has not passed the bridge into being turned into a business model that people can understand. Because it's very fine-tuned using a number of economics measures and using the ecosystem-based and the ecosystem services framework at large, using both monetary and non-monetary evaluation methods. But we are waiting to see now how it's going to inform business models. Another aspect is a lot of cities, they look closely on investments in nature-based solutions and how they increase attractiveness of place. If you look from the Singapore case all the way to the High Lane in New York, all the way to what Rotterdam now is set to do with a 17 million program of greening all the central boulevards of the city. The main financial impetus behind this is increased attractiveness of place. And there's ample of studies that the moment attractiveness of place and sense of place has a positive change, it creates attractiveness for businesses and a lot of market benefits. So this is in terms of the valuation and the economic side. In terms of how to make business models, how to turn them into business enterprises, I know the team in Connecting Nature, they are working very closely with like nature-based SMEs into looking of the next generation on looking of nature-based enterprises. How can we look on all these businesses, small and medium and even large, on nature-based solutions to turn them into sustainable business models and sustainable business enterprises. So this is, I have to say, and from the work I have been seeing with Connecting Nature, is a work in progress. And there is where the narrative and the positioning from OECD to United Nations Financial Committee to United Nations Adaptation Gap Report pointing, and the IPBES report pointing to a nature positive economy creates a quite of a frame, and I might say an attractor into discussing about this type of businesses and this type of new business models. And I'm not saying we're reinventing the wheel, because sustainable business models has been on discussion and information across all these different other sectors. Just now they are entering more prominently the discussion and the attention of the nature and urban ecology and urban sustainability field.
Thank you, Niki. That was very clear. I see that Chris, you've raised a question in chat. You would like to ask the question yourself? You should unmute yourself.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Niki. You can probably read that question there, but I'm just wondering, I guess, whether there are any particular place-based institutional models that are emerging with that are sort of consciously, I guess, designed to try and facilitate these more sort of integrated nature-based solutions, or if at least there are some innovations in the governance space that are going to better enable or facilitate these sorts of solutions.
Well, in terms of the place-based, I have to say I saw two platforms or two mechanisms that they were very successful over the years in Europe and in Brazil that I worked for a number of years. The one is the type of urban innovation funds. Okay, so a number of cities in Europe, they created these incentive schemes that they gave to communities and universities so as to establish, understand, and monitor nature-based solutions that they provide, these like community cohesion and place-based understanding. They come in different shapes and colors, this kind of innovation fund. We call them innovation funds, like as an umbrella thing. In Germany, they have it as they call it the city innovation competition. And you can see like what Dresden is doing with a lot of like community gardens and community innovations, that they create a vision for the future, but they also try to change behavior and making them more place-based. You can see what Stockholm City did with Experiment Stockholm, using the whole city as an experimental place, create a competition in a way, but also a forum between different community groups in collaboration also with consultants, with firms, and with scientists into projects for transformation for the city, and they look on specific neighborhoods. The Urbact Secretariat across Europe with Urbact 3 program also focused on this, on creating governance capacities of planners to work with communities, to work with the citizens in a very specific methodology, providing them funds, providing them money, but also providing them a venue of knowledge exchange to exactly facilitate the uptake of NBS. So it came in different ways. In Brazil, it was through the Sustainable Cities platform. And later on, with a large consultation, it created the Sustainability Living Labs Fund that went all the way down to precincts, to neighborhoods. It didn't went to the city level, it really went a level lower. So these are like examples of cases that they came with an innovation funding perspective, seizing on who are there, who have a partnership, who have a specific plan for a specific place, not just concepts, but really transforming the place. And I have the numbers also in terms of the funding, but it's in different currencies. So it's gonna take some brain power to translate them to Australian dollars. I think that's probably a follow-up. I have to do the calculations.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks.
Thanks, Niki, and thanks, Chris. I think, Becky, you got your hand up, and I want to check before you ask a question. Shireen, did you have your hand up as well? Okay, so Becky first, and then Shireen.
Hi, thanks, Niki, for that. That was great. I feel like I've learnt lots, and I'm working on a project, the RISE project, which involves putting nature-based solutions into 24 informal settlements in Indonesia and Fiji. And I come to the project as a gender scholar focusing on the impact of the participatory co-design that's happening in RISE. So firstly, I wanted to thank you for that presentation and for the thoroughness of those slides, and make a request, if possible, to share them, because they're incredibly rich and have a lot that I feel I could read from following up the references in there. But I had a specific question about the three models of justice that you put on that map there that you didn't have time to get into. You talked about distributive justice, I think, about participatory justice. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what you meant by those. Thanks, Niki.
Thank you. Well, of course, I'm going to share the slides, and I can also send some of the papers to Rob for distribution. My slides are always heavy because of the images. So just saying that, I'm not going to flood your email. I'm going to send it with a quick transfer to Rob, and then he's going to figure out how to share it broadly. Definitely happy to share. In terms of the model, the four-dimensional framework that Melissa and I have been working now for 2 years is you might say the three typical dimensions of ecological justice: the distributional, the recognition, and the participatory one. And on top of it, we also included the capabilities approach, looking on the capabilities of the ecosystem to actually bounce back, and also to create or not create injustices. Because it is also important to take the natural habitat dimension when we talk about socio-ecological justice. I can share the paper and the full methodology, and we're waiting actually. This work comes in form from a very large scale literature review. More than 800 papers were reviewed from Mel and me into identifying the dimensions of the framework. So I can tell you that is I cannot say it's like the classic of ecological justice, but with a critical take of looking from a systems perspective of the couple socio-ecological technological system. And why we started this methodology was, and this approach of mapping, is to identify which are the grounds in Melbourne as case study grounds that is good to go and do more embedded case study research with interviews, with field observations, to also understand how people perceive injustice in place. Because sometimes we go very biased into one location, or neither be a city or be a neighborhood because of previous definitions or historical definitions of injustice. What if we take a new framework and do a mapping and then go informed into our case study research? because indicators and data can create this big picture understanding, but for me, it's not enough. It always says half of the story. And I'm happy to meet you. I have worked in informal settlements in Brazil, talking about their governance capacity to be part of a discussion on improving their living conditions with nature-based solutions, as you might say, cheap to implement infrastructure in comparison, you know, to large infrastructure projects or grey infrastructure projects, especially because of the informality. So I think it's, yeah, we can exchange some notes.
Look forward to coffee one day soon then.
Thank you.
Thanks. Shireen, over to you.
Thanks, Niki, for a very rich presentation as always. I wanted to follow up on one of the papers that you showed and talked about, which looked at basically a review of nature-based solutions and identifying some of the challenges in going forward. I would say the challenges that you put out there, conceptual challenges, governance challenges, societal challenges, all those really resonated well with me, and I guess perhaps some others in the room who have been working on water-sensitive urban design as an example of nature-based solutions in this space. I was actually curious to understand what you see as sort of challenges that are unique to Australia based on your recent experiences in the past few years as compared to the experience you have had in Europe and elsewhere in the world. Are there some challenges that are particularly unique to the Australian context?
Yeah, thanks for this. I can't reply to this question because I have been doing research the last 1.5 years, even during the pandemic, with Australian cities. So, but I'm also careful because I'm still learning about the context and the operations of Australian cities. I can say two things are very unique in Australia. The one is the lack of a statewide evidence base on all the good practices of sustainable practices that Australian cities have been doing. Even if you organize this at a metropolitan scale, this kind of evidence base does not exist. Or it has been done and not updated. I mean, I know like the city of Melbourne has been doing some mapping, but this mapping again came with kind of a conceptual bias or with a bias on how it can inform a specific lens on the living Melbourne. Other cities have been doing very good strategic positioning, but not collecting or systematizing the evidence in a way that can be used across different communities. I think that why I'm saying this as a challenge is because what I find from talking to cities and a number of very good strategic thinkers around Australia is it creates this false finding that there is not enough sustainable practices in Australian cities. And I have to say from my research so far, I tend to believe the opposite. There's a lot of things that are happening and very good practices that can be showcased, but this evidence is not systematically gathered. Or it remains to city specific, like and we had this in Europe as well until a number of initiatives emerged into collecting this evidence. I'm not saying it's working perfectly or is all the infrastructure is there in Europe, but there is already some infrastructure that creates some critical mass. Climate Adapt, OPLA, the EEA database, and the European Commission databases of projects and all these like project-wide evaluation reports create a little bit of a more overarching view. So I think this is like one of the challenges that people are doing very good things, and especially the city science policy interface works well. There is evidence, but this evidence remains fragmented and not collected in one place, even not at the state level. The second challenge I find is, I try to say that in a politically correct way, that I think Australian cities are afraid to lead. Okay. I find that Australian cities have many things to showcase if they have a shifting perspective that what they do and the unique ecological context that they have, because we have tropical cities, we have dry cities, we have desert climate cities. that they are doing things, they are taking into consideration the climate change challenges in the absence of a strong climate change policy at the federal level. They are continue doing very, very good in terms of activities, initiatives, plans, infrastructure regeneration that can speak, can I say, to the Southern Hemisphere, to a lot of the neighbors, instead of Singapore, Southeast Asia, even Japan, New Zealand, going and have a dialogue with Brazil or going and have a dialogue with the European Union. Why they don't have a dialogue with Australia? That they have more similarities in terms especially of ecological conditions and ecological challenges. So I find this is an opportunity, you know, and for the scientists and for the cities to lead the way in this unique socio-ecological context. So that's for me is the second challenge. Like, they're afraid to lead. They're like, just wait to see what Berlin is doing. Yeah, but Berlin is having so much flood and so much rain that is not the same as other cities. It's a different context.
Thanks a lot.
I don't want to turn it into a political agenda, but that also has implications for the science policy collaborations.
Thank you, Niki. We have to stop for time reasons. There were a couple of more questions in the chat. One by Kathy around the vulnerability of nature-based solutions to extreme climate impacts, and Darren wanted to raise a question around urban planning and experimentation in relation to nature-based solutions. I suggest, if you're okay with that, that Darren and Kathy can reach out to you separately from this seminar.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would just like to thank you once again very much. A very inspiring talk. I think you spoke to many different aspects across work in MSDI and Monash more widely. So that's really good and many opportunities, I think, for us to continue collaboration into the future. So thanks again, Niki, for taking the time to do this and share your knowledge with us. And see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting. Very, very honored.
Thanks, Niki.
Thanks.
Thank you.